Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. Welcome back to another tech tip with me, Asteroid. Today we're going to be looking at the kick and sub relationship, not in the general sense, but more in the sense of kick and sub overlap. This seems to be an issue that crops up time and time again with various demo submissions that we have for our record label. And I'm going to show you a really quick way to combat this so that you've got a nice space for both your kick and your sub basses as well. All right. So in this project, I've just got a typical trance kick, a 16th note rolling sub bass, and an 8th note offbeat sub bass. And I'm going to show you how to combat this with both styles. So first of all, I'm just going to play the kick a second. It sounds like this. Pretty typical kick sound, yeah, for trance music, especially for the more modern uplifting stuff. So this is the 16th sub bass here. And I'm going to play it in context with a kick. Now, of course, it doesn't sound too bad at the moment, but you can quite clearly hear that there is some confliction between the kick and the sub notes. So I'm going to show you how to combat this by using LFO tool. So for a rolling sub bass style, you want to look for a shape like this. I'm going to use one of my saved presets just in the interest of saving time, of course. Alright, so this is the kind of shape that you're looking for a traditional kind of rolling 16th note sub bass. Okay, so it already sounds a little bit tighter. But as you can see here, you're still running the risk of this little bleed there. To show you in more detail, I'm going to use a great plugin by Oscillos called Megascope. It's by Schultz Audio, in fact. If you guys are interested, I will pop a link in the description below. So we're going to be looking at this section here with the red bassline notes. If you look at the blue grid lines here, these are quarter notes, and this is where your kick will be hitting, okay? So just take a look at this sub bass without LFO tool. So you can quite clearly see the bleed into the attack portion of your kick, okay? Which is what you don't want, of course. The attack of the kick is the most prominent part, should be the most powerful part, and it should always be revealed in your mix as well. So we would like to avoid this, of course. So even with LFO tool engaged here, or enabled rather, you're still getting a little bit of bleed. So I'm going to show you how to cut this tail off, okay? So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to duplicate the LFO tool. I know what you're thinking, why two LFO tools? But at this point, I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do. So with this one, I'm just going to pull it back to the second grid line, making sure the snap is on 8, guys, yeah? So the second grid line, if you hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, you can snap to the grid lines. So I'm just going to pull the third node to grid line 2, and then I'm going to pull the attack node, if you can call it that. And then I'm going to pull this node here all the way down like this, just to cut off that tail region, yeah? So we've got the first instance that looks like this, and the second instance that looks like this, directly after each other. And now if you have a look in Megascope, it's much tighter within those 3 16th note regions. No tail bleeding over into the kick at all. Guys, this is super important. I can't tell you how important this is because, I mean, imagine at lower volumes, you can't really hear the kind of kick and sub confliction, but as soon as you have everything mastered at 0 dB, you're definitely going to hear this. If you don't hear it, you're going to feel it, at least in the sub region, yeah? This is super important. On a big system, that would be very, very heavy, despite it looking small in terms of amplitude on this side. It makes sense that it's small because it's at the tail end of the sub, of course, but you don't want anything rolling into the attack portion of your kick. All right, make sure that's always clean. That's how to do it with the rolling sub bass. So now I'm going to show you how to do it with achieve the same thing with the offbeat sub here. Again, using LFO tool. And I'm just going to add this instance again before Megascope. Make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use the same preset again, just my mid-bass, general mid-bass preset usually. And then we're going to tweak it from here. So for an offbeat bass or eighth note, I'm just going to snap it to the middle line here. I'm going to pull the first note all the way down and then the second note all the way down like this as well. So you have something like this. Sorry, beg your pardon. Eighth note offbeat. But you still have this kind of slight tail here. So let's check it out in Megascope. Okay, so it looks like the tail is fine there, but it doesn't quite, the rhythm of it isn't quite right. So what I would suggest is bringing this this last note, or the one before last in fact, just bringing this into the left slightly. That there, around there sounds a bit tighter to me. It sounds a bit more like the sub bass has a bit more energy as well. So these are how to, this is how to fix it in terms of when you're working in MIDI. However, what I would like to recommend, guys, I always recommend this to everybody, is once you're happy with your kick, and your sub relationship, whether it's rolling or offbeat eighth notes, what I would recommend is always bouncing to audio, guys. Yeah, once you're happy. So even if you have your chord progression, I don't know, for example, even if you have your chord progression like this, okay, for your kind of main drop where all your leads and pads play. Once you finalize that, I'd bounce everything to audio. If you're a bit scared about committing to audio straight away, then just duplicate the channels so that you have one MIDI and one audio version of each, yeah? So we can call this kick audio. I'll bounce this one, freeze, flatten in place, turn this one off. So we'll work with kick audio for this one. We'll leave this one as MIDI. We'll call it rolling 16th note audio. And we'll work with this one. We'll flatten that track so we have it all in audio as well. We'll close down the MIDI version. And we'll do the same for this one. Name it audio. Turn the MIDI one off, collapse it, and then freeze and flatten. Okay, great. So I know that we've, generally we fixed this in MIDI, but the reason I love to work in audio is because you can zoom right in and you can physically see the waveform a lot better. So you can check on that overall tightness of your waveforms as well. As you can see, this is starting directly on the 8th note. This is directly within the 16th note region. All right, so as you can see here as well, the reason it's good to bounce to audio here is because you also get this additional benefit of seeing the kick drum in terms of length. So if we loop this part, the body of the kick is largely playing through the 3/16 notes here, and it's playing through the 8th note offbeat a fair amount as well. Now what I would do, a lot of people don't like to do this. I do, but a lot of people don't. It depends who you speak to. I will always pull in the tail a little bit here. If it's the 16th note, I will just tail off slightly. To give you an example of what that sounds like with the 16th note. Okay, it just sounds a little bit tighter. You're tailing off a little bit just as it's going into the 2nd note. This isn't too much. In fact, you could even go to an 8th note kick and just tail off a little bit here. I know what you're thinking, guys, because I hear it all the time. If you remove this much of the kick tail or the subtail from the kick, aren't you going to lose a lot of the kick weight? Now, technically, yes, but my argument is, what do you need the kick subtail for if your sub bass is taking over in that area? So that's something to think about, okay? I'll just play it in relation to the 8th beat as well, 8th note rather. So this is what I would do. This is how I like to keep things nice and tidy. The kick cuts off at an 8th note, generally speaking, even with 16th notes. But if you feel that's too much, you can always come back and, just tail off a little bit like this. But like I said, it's all about creating the space for the elements. Don't forget, a kick is a kick and a bass is a bass. Allow them to do their jobs, yeah? Yes, they do work in the same area. but that doesn't mean that your kick should be bleeding into your basses at all. We should be doing everything we can to clean up both elements. Excuse me, clean up both elements so that they work together perfectly and you have a much tighter kick and sub relationship. Okay guys, that's it for this free tech tip. If you're interested in more juicy tips or more advanced production techniques, please feel free to head over to my website. It's asteroidmusic.net, and you can find different resources and even tuition time on there. Also guys, if you're watching on YouTube, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video with your friends as well. And thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.